Clown in a Cornfield has just been released on digital, and this 2025 feature, which taps into coulrophobia, which is the fear of clowns, gave us Frendo, the latest clown to be born in the world of horror movies. With multiple gory deaths that occurred, and an ending which showed that maybe the idea of Frendo and everything that he stood for wasn't eradicated like they all thought it was, and a potential sequel being on the horizon. I wanted to go through the entire kill count in the movie, explain every gruesome death, and also share if it's worth watching. So let's get into it. Here is Clown in a Cornfield, the kill count review and every death explained. Just to let you know, this video's gonna contain spoilers. The kill count. The first death that occurred in the movie was the death of Jessica. She was from the 1990s part of the movie, which was one particular era where the townspeople decided to do a cull of the people that they felt were plaguing the town. We didn't see how she was killed, but it looked like she had some kind of slash to the back of her head, which could have been done with an axe or a blade. The next death that then occurred was of Tyler from the 1990s, as he ran away from Frendo after he saw Jessica die right in front of him. He tried to escape but was stopped by a scarecrow and was ultimately stabbed with a pitchfork and then raised up above the cornfield so he'd bleed out quicker. Following this, we cut to the present day and we saw that Tucker was the first of the friend group to end up being slain. He was in his home, and after being sent the video that they recorded at the factory, Frendo was seen on his doorbell cam. After moving through the house and finding the jack-in-the-box that was present at most of the killings that Frendo committed, he was snuck up on and he ended up getting slashed in the neck, causing him to bleed out and then ultimately die whilst being wrapped up. The next death that occurred was Matty. This was one that you could definitely see coming with the character. Whilst he was in his garage working on his bench press, he found a jack-in-the-box, but he didn't take much notice of it. Whilst he was pushing towards failure, Frendo appeared and didn't allow him to put the bar back on the rack, which meant that his arms were getting weaker and weaker whilst holding all of this weight. As this was happening, Frendo then put a saw underneath the bar, so when it dropped, it would essentially cut his head. And that's exactly what happened. His head actually ended up rolling into a cooler that Frendo took away. After this, it was then the evening of the Founders Day celebration, and at the party that was taking place, Ginger emerged from the cornfield with an arrow in her back, showing that she'd been shot by Frendo. During this moment as well, we also saw that another partygoer received an arrow through the head as he looked on at what was happening. And then, following this, we saw one of the Frendos getting shot by Rust. The next main death that occurred after this was Ronnie's. She felt as though she was going to be the next one to die, and that was exactly the case. As herself, Quinn and Janet were running away from one of the Frendos, another came out of the blue. She wasn't looking where she was going, and she ended up running into the chainsaw that Frendo was holding. The blood went absolutely everywhere on this one, and Frendo even went in for some overkill. The next main death that occurred, and the final one from the friendship group, was Janet. Whilst Quinn and herself made it into the Tillersons' house, they thought one of the residents was dead. However, they were pretending to be dead because it was a trap. This led them to then stab Janet with their pitchfork, which caused her to end up perishing. However, shortly after, Quinn took the pitchfork out and ended up using it on Mr. Tillerson, who was dressed up as Frendo, leading him to die right next to the person that he just killed. This was then when we started to see the different versions of Frendo starting to be killed off one by one. The first was the one in the medical center who was stabbed by Quinn's father, and he ended up dying after removing the knife from his neck. The second was the store clerk who got his head caved in by a concrete block after Quinn's father drove through the wall of the factory. The next was Cole's mother, who was impaled by a metal pipe. Then we saw that Sheriff Dunn, who was also a version of Frendo, was killed by Quinn with the shocker that he used on her several times. She snuck up on him and ended up shocking him through the mouth, which essentially fried his face whilst he was alive. It was definitely one of the more brutal deaths. Then, the final death that we saw in the entirety of the movie was the final version of Frendo that came out of nowhere. We didn't see who it was, but I'm imagining that it was Mr. Vern, as he was the only version of Frendo that we didn't see being killed during the final showdown, and he was essentially run over by the clown car, and he must have been hit by the chainsaw too, as there was tons of blood. So in total, there were 15 deaths that we saw throughout the entire runtime of the movie, and I'm not gonna lie, not a single one of them wasn't done in a gory or brutal fashion. They were creative, and it's how I like the deaths in horror movies, over the top and a complete bloodbath. I'd say the most brutal one was definitely Ronnie's. Hers just looked so painful and it felt like it lingered on whilst she was still alive. Sheriff Dunn's is up there as well. My review of the movie. Clown in a Cornfield is an okay watch. It's nothing special. It feels like the type of movie that if it were on Netflix, you'd throw it on a Friday or Saturday night, sit there, not take it too seriously, and just enjoy it for what it is. It's something that I felt like I used to do a lot during college with these type of horror movies that are purely there for shock value and the bloodbaths. They're just easy watches where you don't have to focus that much after a long day, but the story is relatively simple to follow so you don't get lost. The creative deaths also help with staying engaged within it, and do you know what? I'd probably say this is a movie that's worth watching with a friend or two. With regards to the story, I thought it was pretty interesting having multiple Frendos. That was a twist that I didn't really expect, but the moment that it did happen, I feel like it became kind of obvious that it was the adults that were in the town causing the chaos because of Quinn saying the old people here are strange. So the reveal at the end wasn't that groundbreaking. Frendo as a character is one that I don't think will be remembered that easily. As there were so many of them, there was no key personality trait that made him memorable in any way. He looked quite haunting and menacing, and I'd even say that Cole's father as the ringleader with the makeup on was quite scary to look at too. But by having multiple people be this clown, it just means it'll probably be a character that'll get forgotten about. I'm guessing that the showrunners let Cole's father get away at the end because it leaves it open for a sequel, and maybe he could take over the reign of being Frendo, which I wouldn't be opposed to. Because Frendo was a pretty cool and freaky looking clown, and I also think Kevin Durand would make a great horror villain icon. When it came to the overarching theme of older people doing this purge every few generations because they got what was being compared to a bad crop of people, it was an interesting concept. And in having this town that was stuck in the past with no cell service, no advanced technology, and wanting to live in an era that they were comfortable in worked quite well. I would say though, it didn't really feel like the 90s, it felt like the late 70s and early 80s with the sort of tech that they had. Like, what the hell was this guy even watching? When it comes to the performances in the movie, I don't think there was anything to write home about. They all just kinda did their jobs, but it was enough. It's a movie that's more about the deaths and being made to feel uncomfortable. So as long as the performances aren't terrible, it doesn't take you out of the world. I'd probably say that one of my favourite moments in the movie was the scene where we saw Tucker being killed. The build-up was definitely the tensest moment, and the way that the camera followed him around the house whilst keeping him the centre focal point with the camera not allowing us to see around him really added to that feeling of tension and knowing that something was on the horizon but not knowing when it was going to happen. When he moved the cupboard door, I thought Frendo would be there, but then having his reflection present on the mirror instead, it was a nice touch and it caught me off guard. I'd probably say it was the most immersive part of the movie. Overall, when it comes to if Clown in a Cornfield is worth a watch, I'd say that if horror movies and slashers in particular are your thing, then I'd say that it is. It's easy, it's enjoyable, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and there are a ton of creative, bloody deaths within it. Just don't go in expecting the next modern classic or something that's going to push the boundaries of the genre. It's almost like that Thanksgiving horror movie that was released a couple of years back, but I wouldn't even put it on that level. It's a fun time on a Friday night. That's probably how I'd best describe it. So, there you have it. Clown in a Cornfield kill count review and every death explained. If you want to see more of your favourite movies from 2025 being broken down, then check the playlist below. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of this movie? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.